You won't believe which frontier food was once considered more luxurious than steak and was made using a calf's head. In a time when nothing could go to waste, even the most unlikely ingredients became delicacies on the trail. Back when America was still being carved from wilderness, survival didn't come from fancy kitchens. It came from cast iron pots, open fires, and raw ingenuity. From slow-cooked stews made with organs to biscuits baked directly in ashes, these meals fed the pioneers, cowboys, and outlaws who helped shape the West. In this video, we're diving into 15 Wild West dinners no one makes anymore. The forgotten, the bizarre, and the surprisingly delicious dishes that kept our ancestors alive and kicking. Some might make your mouth water, others might make you grateful for takeout. Let's dig in. Son of a Gun stew. This boldly named stew was a cowboy classic, born out of necessity on the open range. When a calf was butchered, nothing went to waste, especially the organs, which spoiled quickly in the heat. Son of a Gun stew combined liver, heart, kidneys, and sometimes even more mysterious parts, simmered slowly with whatever vegetables could be found. Don't let the ingredients scare you off. This was frontier soul food. It delivered vital iron and nutrients that beef and beans alone couldn't provide. Chuckwagon cooks knew how to balance flavors, turning tough cuts into something tender and deeply satisfying. The name? Let's just say it was the polite version, because the original probably wouldn't pass for dinner conversation. If you had to pick between this and a plain tin of beans, which would you choose? Pemmican. Pemmican wasn't just food. It was survival in its most compact form. Made by pounding dried buffalo meat into powder, then mixing it with melted fat and dried berries, this dense cake could last for months, or even years, without spoiling. Fur traders, mountain men, and explorers relied on it while navigating the vast wilderness where a failed hunt could mean starvation. Just a handful of pemmican packed the nutrition of several pounds of fresh meat, and while it might not win any culinary beauty contests, its staying power is legendary. Think of it as the original protein bar, rugged, reliable, and ready for anything. Would you stash one in your pack? Salt Horse. If you've ever bitten into something that felt like chewing a belt, you might understand why this was called Salt Horse. It was beef, or sometimes pork, so heavily salted it could outlast the season. Sailors and frontier workers carried it because it didn't spoil, even under the hottest sun. But eating it? That took patience. It had to be soaked for hours, boiled in multiple water changes, and even then, it was still, let's say, texturally challenging. Yet it packed essential protein and salt for men doing grueling physical labor. No one looked forward to it, but when there was no fresh meat, Salt Horse was the gritty reminder that food didn't have to be pretty to keep you alive. Would you brave a bite? Rattlesnake stew. It might sound like something out of a dare, but on the frontier, rattlesnake stew was just practical eating. When deer and rabbit were nowhere to be found, settlers turned to the slithering protein right under their boots. Skinned, chopped, and simmered with wild onions and prairie herbs, rattlesnake meat became surprisingly palatable. Most folks said it tasted like a mix between chicken and fish. The stew cooked low and slow, turning fear into fuel. And once people got past the what, they found it hearty, flavorful, and reliable. So here's the question: snake or no snake? Would you try a spoonful? Mock turtle soup. When real turtle was off the menu, but people still craved the rich, gelatinous goodness of turtle soup, creative cooks turned to the next best thing, a calf's head. Yes, you heard that right. Simmered low and slow, it delivered the same thick, luxurious broth that made turtle soup famous. This dish wasn't for the squeamish, but it was pure frontier ingenuity. Packed with collagen and nutrients, it was nourishing, elegant, and surprisingly refined, especially for something made from ingredients most would toss aside. In fact, mock turtle soup was often saved for guests or the sick, which tells you just how special it really was. Would you be bold enough to give it a try? Fire-roasted prairie turnips. Before potatoes made their way west, prairie turnips were the go-to root veggie of the Great Plains. Indigenous communities harvested them with care, roasting the tubers right in the coals until the skins charred and the insides turned sweet and nutty. Also known as prairie potatoes or Indian turnips, they packed both flavor and sustenance, perfect for long winters or food shortages. The trick was knowing when to pick them. Too early and they were bitter, too late and they were woody. But when done right, they were a smoky, satisfying treat that bridged cultures and nourished generations. Think of them as nature's original slow-roasted snack. Would you try one fresh out of the ashes? Ash cakes. When ovens weren't an option and Dutch ovens were too valuable to risk, frontier cooks turned to one of the most ancient baking methods around: ash cakes. Made with just cornmeal, water, and salt, the dough was wrapped in leaves like corn husks or cabbage, then buried right in the coals of an open fire. The result? A smoky, slightly gritty bread with a tough, rustic charm. It wasn't fancy, but it did the job, providing critical carbs to loggers, settlers, and anyone toughing it out in the wilderness. You didn't need a kitchen, just a good fire, a bit of know-how, and a tolerance for the occasional crunch of ash. Would you give it a try for breakfast in the wild? Campfire beans. If there's one dish that defines the cowboy campfire, it's beans. Slow cooked over hot coals, packed with bacon, molasses, and enough smoke to make your eyes water, in the best way. Before canned beans ever existed, trail cooks soaked them overnight, then simmered them for hours while the crew worked. They weren't just food, they were comfort in a pot. Sweet, smoky, and savory all at once. Salt pork added the richness. Molasses gave them a mellow sweetness, and wild onions or dried chilies, when available, gave them kick. Cowboys scooped them up with biscuits and ate them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. One pot could feed a whole crew for days. Could you survive the trail on beans alone? Sourdough pancakes. Before sunrise on the trail, there was one sound everyone looked forward to: batter sizzling on a greased skillet. Sourdough pancakes were the undisputed breakfast hero of the chuck wagon. The magic came from a living sourdough starter, lovingly fed and passed along like a pet with yeast. It bubbled in clay crocks wrapped in blankets at night, waiting to be transformed each morning into golden, tangy flapjacks. Mixed with whatever liquid was on hand, water, milk, even coffee, these pancakes weren't just food, they were tradition. Cowboys stacked them high, poured on molasses or honey, and hit the saddle full. Fluffy, filling, and flavored by wild yeast, they were the kind of breakfast that made a hard day a little easier. How many could you eat before the sun came up? Chuck wagon biscuits. On the trail, the cook wasn't just making food, he was performing magic. And his signature trick? Biscuits. Baked to perfection in Dutch ovens with coals on top and bottom, these weren't your average side dish. They were the plate, the bread, the sandwich, and sometimes the whole meal. Cookie would cut the dough with a tin can and arrange the biscuits in the oven like buried treasure. 20 minutes later, you had golden, fluffy goodness that could soak up stew, cradle slabs of salt pork, or disappear straight from the pan. Light, warm, and smoky with a kiss of the fire, these biscuits earned their place in every cowboy's heart. Wouldn't you want one straight from the coals? Tuna casserole? Ah, tuna casserole, the unsung hero of weeknight dinners in the 1970s. With canned tuna, egg noodles, condensed soup, and a crunchy topping of breadcrumbs or potato chips, it was the kind of dish that filled both bellies and hearts. It came together fast, fed a crowd, and cost next to nothing. That creamy, salty, crispy combo made it a staple in school lunchrooms, potlucks, and suburban kitchens coast to coast. It wasn't glamorous, but it didn't need to be. It was reliable, warm, and always there when you needed it. And even now, the first bite can still take you back to a linoleum-floored kitchen and a casserole dish fresh from the oven. Would you dig in again for old time's sake? Indian pudding. This rich, spiced dessert blended Native American staples with colonial comfort. Cornmeal, molasses, milk, and eggs slow-baked into a warm, custardy pudding. Indian pudding may not look flashy, but its deep caramel flavor and creamy texture made it a beloved treat in frontier kitchens. The cornmeal gave it heartiness, the molasses added iron and richness, and the long baking time filled the house with a smell that made winter feel a little warmer. Served with a pat of butter, a splash of cream, or a drizzle of maple syrup, it was the perfect end to a long, hard day. A dessert with history in every bite. Are you curious enough to try it? Borscht. Few dishes are as eye-catching or as soul-warming as borscht. This deep red beet soup came to America with Eastern European immigrants and found a cozy spot in 1970s kitchens. Simmered with cabbage, potatoes, and sometimes beef or pork, it was hearty, tangy, and perfect for a cold day. Topped with a dollop of sour cream and a sprinkle of dill, borscht wasn't just a meal, it was a statement. It brought old-world comfort into new-world homes, offering flavor as bold as its color. Whether served at a holiday table or a quiet dinner for two, borscht made sure no one forgot their roots. Would you ladle up a bowl? Herring salad. Herring under a fur coat. This one's a showstopper. Layered, vibrant, and not for the timid. Herring salad, also called herring under a fur coat or shuba, combined pickled herring with beets, potatoes, apples, onions, and a rich mayo sour cream dressing. With roots in Russian and Eastern European cuisine, it was both flavorful and theatrical. Perfect for potlucks and dinner parties in the 70s. The sweet and salty, creamy and tangy layers were topped off with a vivid pink finish from the beets, equal parts salad and centerpiece. It made an impression before the first bite. Would you try a slice or admire it from a safe distance? Syllabub. Light, frothy, and just a bit tipsy. Syllabub was the original celebratory drink-dessert combo. Made by whipping cream while slowly adding wine or hard cider, this colonial favorite was served on special occasions when both dairy and alcohol were on hand. It curdled just enough to create a luscious, mousse-like texture, somewhere between a drink and a dessert. A touch of sugar or honey made it even more indulgent. On the frontier, it was a rare treat, both luxurious and resourceful. You didn't just sip syllabub, you performed it. So tell me, would you toast with tradition? And there you have it. 15 forgotten Wild West dinners that once fueled the pioneers, cowboys, and frontier families who shaped American history. Some were hearty, some were downright strange, but every one of them tells a story of survival, creativity, and grit. Which of these dishes made your stomach growl? Or your eyebrows raise? Let us know in the comments. Which Wild West dinner sounds the most mouth-watering to you? We'd love to hear your pick.